Author of Cash is Queen, the world's first financial literacy book written exclusively for preteen and teenage girls. Davinia is also the founder of Rainchq. Wow. Good morning, Davinia, and welcome to Good Morning SKN.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure indeed. So I'm going to start with Rainchq. What is Rainchq?
So Rainchq is, I always think of it as my third child. So I'm a mother of two daughters already.
Really?
My background is in the investment management industry, in which I recognized that there were a number of financial inequalities that women faced, particularly around the extent to which we were investing our money for the long term, saving into a retirement plan. And so Rainchq offers qualified and regulated financial advice, as well as financial education and coaching specifically for women to help close some of those financial gaps.
All right, so congratulations on publishing the book. First of its kind, Cash is Queen. A very specific target audience. I want to ask you why.
Yes. So of course, as you've just heard, so my career has been obviously working with a variety of different clients, both men and women, but recognizing specifically that despite us representing 50% of the global population, if not more, the challenges that women faced when it came to our finances just seem to be growing larger and larger. We have a gender pay gap that plagues us, there's an investing gap, and at least in the UK, we're seeing women retiring with 1/5 of the pension pot or retirement savings of the average UK man. So if you imagine at 65, which is the average, or at least used to be the average age of retirement in the UK for women, we're retiring with £35,000 to our name with which to live for the rest of our lives. And that really helps to focus the mind around why there is a real need to speak to women around their financial literacy. If you think about the next generation now, my mission is to make sure that the younger generation do not have to confront some of those challenges. And so whilst financial literacy and the need to be better educated around our finances is not something that is unique to women. Everybody needs to play their part and contribute, but certainly men seem to have a head start when it comes to their finances, and there are a number of different reasons for that.
So what are some of the reasons, since you would have mentioned that?
Yeah, so I think, what we see anecdotally is that men have a higher propensity for asking for what they're worth. That's the first thing. In the previous segment, you talked about body positivity and confidence, and actually even things like that tend to plague women in thinking about body image and self-esteem and all of those associated issues. They plague women far more than men. It doesn't mean that men don't suffer with those confidence issues, but actually when you think about some of the debate around, who looks good and who doesn't look good and who's hot and who's not on Instagram, those sorts of things tend to plague women far more than they do men. So there is something around confidence. There is also something about, I think, when you think traditionally and institutionally about women's role in the home versus men traditionally going out to work, I think lots of those societal norms have played out as women become, more active economically in terms of our workforce participation. And so what happens is companies just haven't caught up. So at least in the Western world, what you see is that women for doing equal work, despite a number of different legislative steps forward, Equal Pay Act, exists, and there are a number of other things around equality legislatively that exist. Men are still being paid more for the same work. And so what happens is, even just by default, you and I were doing the same role, Jamie, in the workplace, arguably you'd be paid more. And we wouldn't know that unless we had a conversation about our salaries. So I really think that it's important that we recognize lots of these challenges. It's not just about feminism, which I think, lots of people can say, well, no, this is just a feminist crusade. There is a real societal imperative, because I think there is a lot of evidence that when women have the grasp of their finances and have economic empowerment, you see the implications and that ripple effect across communities that impacts both men and women.
Well, that's fair enough, definitely so, because we've had conversations with other guests who've talked about very recently that pay gap and things that we're not aware of, and so you raise a very solid point. Back to the title for 1 second, Cash is Queen.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
So for anybody that's a business owner, you may be familiar with this concept of cash is king, which is effectively, this idea that, cash flow is really everything. If you're running a business and you run out of cash, then the business goes up in smoke, it's over. And so what I was doing was very playfully trying to, play on those words and help the young ladies recognize that, there is a real importance of reigning supreme over your own finances, recognizing that you're in control. So there is a very strong kind of regal theme that runs all the way throughout the book. We talk about, them being, having a royal money mindset. So again, thinking of themselves as being in control of their lives and their money. At the end of each section, we have a summary of all of the main points that we cover. So we're covering everything from budgeting to investing to retirement saving. talk about gratification. And, when you think about concepts like gratification, which apply to much more than just money, you think, if you've got children yourselves, you will know that if they get money, they want to spend it straight away. The idea of instant versus deferred gratification and the importance of being able to wait, save your money for a rainy day. The very name Rainchq, my business name, is about banking those checks for a rainy day. And so you want to encourage the young people at a very early age to understand some of these concepts. So at the end of each chapter, we have what is known as the crown jewels, which just summarize each chapter. So there is a very strong real theme throughout the book.
Nice. I can see that on the cover alone, and then I realize what's going on as I go into it, right?
Most of the adverts on television are geared towards women.
Yes.
How can you get somebody to basically ignore those and save more? How?
Yeah, I think now this is where I'm thinking specifically about the audience for Cash and Screen with younger children and younger people. There is quite a lot that we should be doing in the home anyway to make sure that the children are understanding the value of money. And I recognize it's much harder to do in a social media age. It's much harder to do in a digital age in which, around the world we're using contactless payments, we're using Apple Pay for things. So we're not even necessarily handling cash in the same way as we used to. Children don't necessarily have piggy banks. But I think, talking to them about their money, talking to them about how we might be managing our money. And I recognize that there are some cultural differences that might mean actually we're not necessarily going to say, well, here's my pay slip, look at what I earn. But there are other ways that we can open up a conversation around money, perhaps by talking to them about the household budget. There's evidence that parents who speak to their children about money, those children have a 25% higher financial literacy rate than those children whose parents don't speak to them about money. And so you can see that actually, even just opening up the conversation, asking them what they already know about money, and again, talking to them about this gratification, that it's okay to spend your money when you get some granny might give you money for your birthday or godparents or whoever. You don't have to spend it all, spend some, and it's important to recognize the joy that you can derive from treating yourself. But actually also knowing that if you save that money for a later point in time, that the reward could potentially be sweeter. So I think it's about that, helping them to understand you don't need to spend all of your money straight away, but also to have a strong self-concept so that they don't have to buy, and they don't want to buy whatever it is that their friends have, that they recognize this is what I want, and that's what they want, and that's okay. So there's some broader life lessons, I think, that you can derive from having conversations around money too.
Very important. As you talk about that, when we think culturally about money here, I think you'd also be noticing that you'd have to target the parents as well.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where I'm thinking, okay, you want to target the children, obviously, but the children would probably receive this book because the parents say that managing money is important. Have you gotten any feedback from parents?
Yeah, and it's been really positive, actually. I've had neighbors who've stopped by my house and said, I want to buy the book for my daughter, and actually my daughter's friends as well, which has been really good. And you're quite right. I think, lots of this begins in the home, as we've discussed. There was a study done by Cambridge University which showed that children form their earliest money habits by the age of 7, which is breathtaking, for anybody that's got small children. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I think, oh my gosh, they are already learning by osmosis from me about money. How does mommy manage money in the household? How does daddy manage money? Where does money come from? And what does it mean? What relationship do my parents have with money? Is it fraught with, frustration and contention? Does it cause a lot of stress in the house? Is there a more relaxed approach to money in the house? They're already picking things up. And so you're quite right. It is important that as part of this discourse, we are targeting parents as well. We're having these conversations. So in the work that I do, I'm encouraging parents, particularly now, and we're in the midst of a cost of living crisis. We've got, really intense global economic pressures. It's very inflationary worldwide. And so now is a good time for us to talk to parents about how you're managing your money, how you can optimize your finances, and make some really savvy financial decisions whilst involving the children too. But I think it's fair to say, based on that study that I've just shared and that piece of data, children are already learning anyway from us. So we just need to think about how we can lead by example in making sure that they're learning the right things.
Oh, indeed. You spoke about investments. I want to go there. So you said the men are more prone to investing than women. And why are we taught to just save in the bank? Because as correctly, the money doesn't gain much interest, and it doesn't amount to too much. So how do you get the message across to women to invest just as our counterparts are doing?
Yes, and you're quite right. You make a really valid point, particularly now. I mean, if you think about, I'm not sure what the inflation levels are in St. Kitts right now, but I know that it's causing a lot of strain. In the UK, you know, inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. We're seeing a similar picture in the US. And of course, that's squeezing us. So exactly as you described, if we are disproportionately holding our money in cash in the bank, what it means is the value of those pounds, dollars, EC dollars, is worth less than it would be at a future point in time. So whether you have a finance background or not, we can all understand purchasing power parity. We can all understand, you know, the value of my Rams basket today versus what I could get 6 months ago is quite different. I can now only get some apples, and before I could get some apples and a breadfruit and a mango. So, you know, we can easily see, gosh, my money is not stretching. Investing is one of the best ways to mitigate the impact of inflation, particularly on a long-term basis. So again, the thing that I always try to impress upon people is that this is not just based on my opinion, and we have to be able to do our own due diligence. This is based on evidence and data. So over the long term, think about, and there are lots of different investment instruments, but over the long term, stock market investing, which is the one that lots of us will be familiar with, so investing in stocks and shares, has a virtual certainty of outperforming cash saving in terms of the return you're going to generate on your cash. So as I say, particularly in an inflationary environment, you are trying to at least, if inflation in the UK is 10%, you need to be generating a return on your investments of at least 10% in order to break even. But if you put your money in the bank, you're only going to get maybe 3% or 4% at best on your cash, which means that you're still not gaining. So that's one of the ways that I try to encourage women. And, you know, there's also the emotion around money. You know, I think there's a lot of evidence that for women, it's not that we are necessarily more emotional than men when it comes to investing, but actually we are thinking about broader implications in lots of ways. We're thinking about, we're investing for our children, we're investing for ourselves so that we can look after ourselves in later life. So we are taking our financial decisions to a certain life outcome. So one of the ways that I try to encourage women, without patronizing them, because we are grown people, we're not trying to be condescended to. One of the ways that I encourage women is by saying, let us look at the numbers and let us see, right, if you had these two different options, this is what the value of your money might be in this period of time versus this option. And we look at the opportunity cost. That's one of the ways of saying, you want to achieve some of these things within this time frame, this is the best option for you. And so I think in so doing, you're slowly, you know, nurturing people's minds and changing mindsets. You know, we have to recognize, as I say, money is, you know, there's a lot of psychology around money too. It's not just purely the numbers.
Indeed.
So your business mission, what can you tell us about that?
So Rainchq really exists to help women take control of their financial futures, and more importantly and specifically to build sustainable long-term wealth. And I think that word is so loaded for lots of people. I mean, if you think about some of the connotations, the heavy connotations surrounding wealthy women, you know, lots of people will think of women in divorce situations as having, you know, these multi-million-pound payouts and being these ice maidens, or, you know, women that work in senior leadership positions or directors. Connotations surrounding those women can quite often be quite negative. And so what I'm trying to do is not just demystify the world of finance and investing through the financial education component of what I deliver through my services, but also to encourage women that it's okay for us to want to achieve economic empowerment and to build wealth. We shouldn't shy away from that word, because it is in building wealth that we are able to impact not just our own lives, but the lives of the communities within which we live.
During the break, Davinia, we spoke about the risk that boys take towards girls.
Yes.
Why is it that they're so nonchalant? They do whatever. They don't care if they lose their money, or they pretend not to care if they lose their money. But we are taught, as you said, don't jump off of that. Don't scratch your skin. Don't. Why?
You know, there is certainly when it comes to money, there is a phenomenon known as reckless caution, which means that as women, you know, we talked about inflation prior to the break, and women have a predisposition towards cash saving, for example, because we think we are taking a calculated risk. We think we are, you know, putting our money in the safest place. When actually, as we've discussed, it can actually be one of the worst possible decisions you can make. But we think, if I hold it in cash, when I check my bank account, it's the same amount of money. I haven't lost anything. You haven't gained anything either. And actually, the money is depreciating in value. So it's reckless caution, because ultimately you think you're doing the right thing. You think you're being cautious and conservative. It is reckless because it is not based on any sound data or fact. I'm very objective and fact-based, as you can probably guess. When you think about, when you apply that same principle to raising boys versus raising girls, we all have anecdotal evidence within our own families. Perhaps we do it as parents or godparents. But if you're raising a little girl and you're raising a little boy, what you see is that the boy, in lots of cases, particularly in the Caribbean, particularly among the Black community, the boys are encouraged not to cry, to be tough, to be very alpha male, to leap off a cliff and leap into the sea and not worry if they get scraped, to climb those trees. And the girls are told to be prim and proper. I remember being, you know, in my upbringing, being told these things and looking at my boy cousins and they're doing all sorts of things. And I'm just sat there with my petticoat on and my skirt and told to sit cross-legged and, you know, not let any boys see up my skirt and all of this kind of thing. In the language and, you know, that narrative that surrounds young girls, if you imagine that carrying through into their adult life, that you internalize these things of I must be conservative, I must be prim and proper at all times, I must never put a foot wrong, I must never make a mistake. Boys are making mistakes all the time, and they're encouraged to continue to make mistakes because there are no negative repercussions. Whereas for girls, what we learn is that it's the end of the world if we make a mistake, if we get a bruise, if we scrape ourselves. You know, you might fall down having done something that your parent maybe told you not to do and get home and get spanked for doing what you were told not to do, even though you're already crying.
Indeed.
So there is something in our socialization, and perhaps something that we can also reflect on in terms of how we are raising our boys versus our girls there too.
Wow.
And then it makes its way into the finances, obviously.
Absolutely.
Makes its way into the finances.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Rainchq, the podcast. You've been doing this for 5 years.
Yes.
Why'd you start?
I love chatting, first of all. So I do love talking, but I think the thing about the podcast is that I get the opportunity to speak to a variety of different women from all walks of life. I'm going to be bringing it to St. Kitts soon and speaking to some petition guests, because there are so many incredible women that live and work here. But I think what I'm trying to do in building this global Rainmaker community is to get women to see that actually women are doing different things and achieving their life goals, building wealth and using that wealth to inform their qualities of life. That's really important. And it's important that we see women from different backgrounds, ethnicities, ages, socioeconomic groups doing these things so that it's relatable. One of the big things for me in writing my book was that, you know, particularly given the target audience of preteen and teenage girls, representation is such a big thing. You know, I come from the UK, obviously, but I worked at very senior levels within the finance industry. And in many, you know, I'd sit around the boardroom table in many different instances, and I would be the only woman in lots of respects, definitely the only black woman, quite often the only black person. And so it's really important that we demonstrate to, whether it's women, to young girls, that actually you can achieve these things. Here are examples of women from a cross-section of society from different backgrounds who are doing the things that you can do too.
Lovely. So you just spoke about the Caribbean and London. What is your connection to the Caribbean? I want to know.
So my family are half Kittian on my mum's side. They're from the village, and my dad is Jamaican.
Oh, nice.
Definitely Caribbean.
As Jamie to say, once you're asked where in the Caribbean if someone asks, are you from the Caribbean? The first thing they're gonna say, oh, Jamaica.
You qualify. It's fine. You're good. All right, so let's talk about your accomplishments for a second. Congratulations on being nominated, by the way, for the 2019 Precious Awards, Startup Business of the Year. All right, let's talk about that. What did that feel like to be nominated?
Yeah, you know, I feel like that award, that was one of the first awards that I won. And it was particularly special to me because I think it's a one thing to be recognized by your industry and your peers. So that's a great thing too. But I think being recognized within the Black community, so the Precious Awards is a foundation that was established by a Black woman 20 years ago. Started life as a magazine at a time in the UK where we couldn't get access to magazines that demonstrated or represented women of color, certainly not Black women. We used to have to import all of our magazines from the US, and it would take ages and ages for them to come. So Precious was one of the first. And so the founder of that organization is a very special, you know, we have a very special relationship. So winning that award really was, you know, something that made me feel quite good about what I was doing, my contribution to the Black community.
And also being elevated, I guess, as a woman of color as well.
Definitely.
Wow. And the year after, let us talk about the FinTech Power List. You made that list.
Yeah, so London is the global fintech center of the world. So fintech is effectively financial technology for anybody that is listening and isn't familiar with that. So all of the banking that we do on our phones or via various apps, savings and investments, anything that we do on our using technology to facilitate is known as fintech. And so there is a power list, which is basically, you know, the top 50 people globally who are making, you know, taking great strides. So it was wonderful to be on that list in that year.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
You're quite accomplished, I have to say. Which is great, because I love that you're using your platform to empower women.
Yes.
If you had And you only have about 1 minute left, so I'll give you the opportunity to do so. Let's pretend for a second that you had an audience of women just sitting here, and you want to impart to them how important it is to be financially literate. What would you say to them? That's your camera.
I think what I would say to any woman that's listening is that having a solid grasp of your finances isn't just about, having the money in the bank or being able to say, I'm rich. It's about your quality of life. It's about the contribution you can make, to the children that you're raising, to, your confidence levels, impacts and infuses through every aspect of your life. So really think about your financial literacy as your gift to yourself and the best investment you can make in yourself.
Nice. Before we go, where can we get the book?
So Cash is Queen is available on Amazon, It's on Barnes & Noble, so wherever you are in the world, you can access it online. And of course, I'll be bringing some copies of kits as well. I'm hoping to go into the schools and run some financial literacy workshops for boys and girls.
Good stuff.
Not just girls.